let's tackle a big topic. Let's take a look at block entities. Alright, we found ourselves back in IntelliJ once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at block entities. Now, this is going to be a semi-two-parter, so this tutorial and the next tutorial in the Fabric series should definitely be watched together, and I highly recommend watching both of them completely through. I understand that, it's going to be two quite long videos, but I'm just saying that this is a very complex topic, and to really get everything out of it, I highly recommend doing this. I'm also going to be copying over a lot of the code, because it doesn't matter if I just write it down and you see me writing it down, or I'm going to copy it over and explain it afterwards. So the GitHub repository and the individual gists as well are available in the description below. So that is very important. And in this video right now, we're going to start with a little bit of the theory behind block entities. And for that, we're going to get the best tool out ever, which is, of course, PowerPoint. So what we're going to have is, this is a general overview of block entities explained. Now, this is probably not the best overview. However, we're going to go through this. We're going to explain part by part. So as you can see, there are 4 different parts, or even 4 different classes that are needed for a single block entity. And the 4 classes are the block entity class, right here, the block class, the ScreenHandler class, and the screen class. What is very interesting in this configuration is that the block entity is basically something that simply stores data related to a particular block. That's something you can think about. It's sort of like that. It's not 100% correct, like it's not only that, but it's almost that. So it basically saves data for a particular block. And a particular block also creates a block entity. This happens basically when the block is sort of registered and all of that. Then the block creates that block entity, and they're basically linked together. You can think of it like this. The block entity itself creates a handler, a screen handler, which can also be given particular data. We're going to see that in the next tutorial. In this tutorial, we're basically just going to set it up so that everything works. And then in the next tutorial, we're going to make it so that the block entity is going to give certain types of data or certain integers over to the screen handler, so that both the screen handler and the screen can use them to basically, well, make the progress arrow appear. So we're not going to have the progress arrow appear in this tutorial. That's something for the next tutorial. The block entity itself is actually not too crazy. The block itself is also not too crazy, so each individual part is actually not that complicated. However, the inner workings of them, of course, make it more complicated. When you right-click a block, usually that opens the screen handler. That is basically standard procedure, so to speak. You can see here the screen handler. You can see I've marked this in basically some colors here, right? So you have the 3 slots right here in green. You have those slots in blue, some red slots here. So basically, we have the slots here are done by the screen handler. So where the slots are is completely independent of the screen here, because the screen is just an image. This image right here is the screen. You could put anything in there. You could put a picture of my face in there and it would still be a screen, and you could still have slots above it. And that's the most important thing here. There is a separation of the screen handler and the screen. The screen is a purely image-based thing. There's almost nothing inside of here that has any functionality. Like, the only things you can do in the screen class is display something or not display something. That's pretty much all that you really can do here. The cool thing is that the screen, though, has a reference to the screen handler. And that allows us, basically, because the screen is basically client only, right? This only works on your client. The server doesn't know about it. You have a reference to the screen handler, which can have some data from the entity. And that's basically how you have to push data from the entity to the screen handler and then to the screen. So that's sort of the, well, way you would do it. The screen handler has the slots. So in here, we define the slots where they are on the, basically on the screen, and then we can put items in there. And the green slots here are basically our custom slots, and the blue and red slots are, of course, the player's inventory, which usually should be displayed like this. But once again, you could, in theory, display it however you would like. You could, in theory, make it like 2 rows here and 2 rows here. You could, in theory, could do anything you would want there, but we're, of course, not going to do that. We're going to stick with very vanilla stuff. And then I also marked the progress here, the progress arrow, so to speak, as a purple thing. And the reason I did this is because this is also important, especially in the next tutorial. Once again, this is sort of a two-parter here, because otherwise this would be a bit too long, definitely. That's the general overview. I hope that was sort of understandable. Of course, once we're going to actually see the code, it's going to be even more stark to see what actually happens here. This is, of course, available to you as a cheat sheet as well. Where do you start this? This is always a question of, preference or not, because this is a very circular exercise, so to speak. So we're just going to go into our block package, right-click New Package, and we're going to call this the Entity package, because this is, of course, the block entity. Should make sense. And in here we need two classes, the ModBlockEntities class, and then also we're going to need the Lightning Channeler block entity. And we're actually going to need another thing inside of the item package. We're going to make a new package called Inventory, and this is going to be a new interface, which is called the Implemented Inventory. There you go. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy over the entire class, because it's actually not that interesting to us in this case. So you can see it just has a lot of things in here, and everything also marked. And the code was originally by Juice. So first of all credits go there. But after we've set this up, we can basically ignore it and then go back into our block entity class, extends first of all the block entity class, and then implements both the named ScreenHandler factory as well as the implemented inventory here. So both of these interfaces have to be basically implemented here, and then we're just going to implement all of the stuff that we need to implement. You can see it's actually not that much. Let's hover over again, create constructor matching super, so that we have everything. And we're just going to make a new literal text here. This is going to be the thing that is being displayed at the top, basically. So this is just the name here, Lightning Channeler. If you want to do this like completely properly, I highly recommend making this a translation text, because then you can basically also translate it. Then we also need an inventory, which we can return with this get items here. And that's actually very easy. So this is just a private final defaulted list of item stack called inventory. And this is equal to a defaulted list of size 3 with item stack.empty. So basically I'm going to fill this with empty item stacks, which of course means that they're empty. And then we're just going to return this right here, get items inventory. So that's actually all that we need to do here. And now I'm going to start copying over some stuff. The first thing I'm going to copy over is the read and the write NBT methods, because this simply reads and writes the inventory. Basically when we save the world, then this is being saved. So that's all that we really need to do here. And that's actually really cool. And the crazy thing is that that actually is almost basically the extent of the normal methods that we have. We're going to have some static methods in just a moment, but for the time being, this is almost all that we need. And we can go on to the ModBlockEntities class right here. And here we're going to have a public static block entity type of lightning channeler block entity, lightning underscore channeler underscore block underscore entity, which is equal to, and now it's going to get crazy, right? Registry.register with the registry.block entity type with a new identifier, of course, with the tutorial mod.mod ID, and then lightning underscore channeler. And then after the first parentheses, a comma. And here we want the fabric block entity type builder.create. And then the lightning channel block entity : new. And then here we have to supply a block. For the time being, we're just going to do the bluebells just so that we have anything in there. Then we're going to say build. And then instead of the build here, null. And then save it like this. Right. So of course, for the time being, this is going to throw an error. Not to worry. We're going to now create the actual block. Like I said, this is a very circular exercise. So you are going to run into a few errors along the way. It just is what it's going to be. So in our custom package, in the blocks package, is going to be a lightning general block. And also, let's actually right-click, refactor, rename this so that it only has one L here. And everyone is happy about that. There you go. And inside of the block class, we're actually going to do the following. We're going to extend the block with entity class, and we're going to implement the block entity provider. So those are some new classes. We're just going to do this. Hover over again, create constructor matching super. That's totally fine. And then we have to do the following. So we are going to just return a new lightning channel or block entity here. So this is not going to work for the time being because we're going to have to change the constructor here but we're going to do that in just a moment. Like I said, a circular exercise. We also need to override the getRenderType method and return blockRenderType model, because otherwise our block is not going to be visible, basically. So that's sort of the general idea there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the onUse method, which is the right-click method, to basically call on the ScreenHandler factory, create this, and then open the actual handled screen. So this is the idea. We're going to open the screen when we right-click. This is exactly what we've seen in the cheat sheet. When we right-click the block, the actual screen is going to open. And then a great method that is actually also going to be here, and that is the state on state replaced. This is literally just going to spawn all of the items that are inside of our block, right? So inside of the the block entity, sorry. I'm going to sometimes say tile entity because before it was a tile entity, now it's a block entity. So in the block entity, all of the blocks that are in there are just going to scatter on the ground. So that's absolutely amazing that that sort of just works. And what we're also going to override is the getTicker method right here. So this is very interesting. So we've not yet implemented the tick method in our block entity. We're going to do that in just a moment. But this basically just says, hey, we're going to have a tick method on our lightning channel or block entity, and that is going to basically happen every tick. And in there, we can put any type of basically functionality, which is going to be really freaking cool. And the funny thing is that this is literally the entire block class. We don't ever need to change anything in here. We just now need to make sure that this is actually in the ModBlocks as well. So we're going to go into the ModBlocks class. We're just going to copy over the sapling for the sake of argument here. This is the lightning channel or block, of course, with nothing here. And then we're going to say we're going to not copy something, but we're just going to say of material, let's say .metal, sure, that's going to be fine. And then this is going to be the lightning underscore channeler underscore block. And then this is the lightning underscore channeler. There you go. And this is, of course, just because this is a protected one, so make this public. There you go. And then the error should disappear. The error here should disappear. And then in here, we can say this is the lightning channeler block. And now here, we just need to change the constructor inside of the entity. We have to delete the type here at the front and then pass in the ModBlockEntities.lightning channel block right here. This is going to fix this error. Sorry, this error right here. And it's also going to fix this error. So even though this is actually has a strike through, the only error here is now the tick method, which we're also going to implement very easily. I believe that we can't actually do this, so I'm going to copy it over fairly straightforwardly. So the tick method was already going to have a bunch of stuff in it, so I'm just going to copy over all of these static methods. So those are basically the tick method, craft item, has recipe, and has not reached stack limit. Those are, 3 of those are custom methods, and the tick method is, of course, just the normal method. So I'm going to copy those over. Once again, this is, of course, all available to you in the description below, GitHub repository or individual gists. The tick method, right, has to have this method signature, otherwise it's not going to work. Then the issue here goes away as well. So the block can now be closed. Actually, ModBlocks can also be closed. ModBlockEntities can also be closed. And then the entity is basically also done. We now, of course, still need to make the screen and the screen handler, but no worries there. What is happening in the tick method? Well, the tick method, once again, is called every tick. It makes sense. And here we're immediately evaluating stuff, right? So we're immediately going to say, okay, has the entity a particular recipe? What does that mean? Well, do we have iron wool in the first slot and pepper in the second slot? If that's the case, we're going to return true. And then it's also going to check whether or not the world is thundering. Fair enough. And then we're also going to check has not reached stack limit. This is just because that we don't want to, well, basically craft an item that we can't actually put into the second slot here. And the craft item method basically then just removes the stack or one item from both of the first stacks here and then sets a new stack of type Ruby here. So this is a very crude way of making a custom recipe, and this is definitely not recommended. This is why I said two-parter. Next tutorial in the Fabric series, we're going to basically make a recipe serialization so that we can define our own recipes inside of JSON files in the recipes folder, and that's going to make our lives way easier. We will have to make some major adjustments here, but for the time being, this is just basically for this to, well, try out this stuff. And the is world thundering here, that is something that is completely specific to my a tile entity here. Same with the spawning of the lightning bolt. This is only the case for my tile entity because, of course, we have the lightning channeler, basically that we can craft certain things only when there is a thunderstorm. And we're going to see that in just a moment as well. When we actually make the GUI, then we can see that as well. So next thing, so basically the block and the block entity are done, and they are functioning now. Of course, we can't access them at the moment because we do not have any type of, well, handling of the screens. So in our tutorial mod package, right-click new package called screen, and inside of there, we're going to have 3 new classes. One of them is the lightning channeler screen, and then we're going to have a right-click new Java class lightning channeler screen handler, and then last but not least, the mod screen handlers. There you go. And those 3 classes, we're going to start with the, let's say, the screen handler, and this is going to extend the screen handler class right here. Hover over this, implement methods, so the canUse method has to be implemented, and then hover over again, create constructor matching super, which we're going to change anyway, because actually what we want is we want a sync ID here, and then a player inventory called player inventory, and then this is actually going to not call this, but we're going to have another constructor here, which we're actually going to make public as well. So this is going to be a public, and then the same right here, public. And then this one also going to have the player inventory, but it also is going to have an inventory called inventory. And the first constructor, instead of calling the super, it's actually going to call this, meaning that it is going to call this constructor right here, which is very interesting. So it's going to be sync ID, player inventory, and then a new simple inventory of size 3. In our case, because our block entity has 3 different slots. So we don't need this anymore. And then this we're going to change in just a moment. And then the sync ID is absolutely fine. So this is going to be defined in the mod screen handlers. And just for the sake of argument, I'm going to copy this over because this is actually not too complicated. So you can see this is a screen handler type. So a static screen handler type of lightning channeler screen handler. So this that we've basically been doing here, lightning channeler screen handler, a lot of long names, but no worries. Screen handler registry.register simple. There's also, if I middle mouse button click, you can also register an extended one, which is basically, well, additional stuff that you can do. But the simple one for us is absolutely fine. We don't need an extended one. And for that, once again, pass in a new identifier, lightning channeler, and then the lightning channeler new, which should be this right here. So it refers to this actual constructor in that case. And then in here, we can basically call the mod screen handlers .lightning channeler handler, and bam, all of a sudden no more errors present. Right, and then let's go through. So I'm actually going to copy over all methods inside of the screen handler class. So once again, take a look at the gists or the GitHub repository for this, and we can also see that we need 2 fields here, the inventory field and the world field, and then everything should work here. So the add hotbar and the inventory are 2 methods that I made that are just going to be, well, making it a little bit more readable, because having this inside of the constructor, I always feel like it's a travesty. It just doesn't look nice, and just calling it, hey, add player inventory, add hotbar, everyone understands what that means. This is the transfer slot method. This is something we're not going to take a look at because this is a absolutely horrendous thing that I hate with a passion. This basically just enables us to do shift clicking, and the items are going to immediately be pushed into the inventory. I hate this with a burning passion. Then I'm going to copy over the rest of the constructor here. As you can see, it's actually not that crazy. First of all, we're going to check for the size, just making sure that the inventory is the correct size. That's great. Then we're going to set the inventory field inside of the screen handler to the inventory that we're going to pass in. This here is our block entity. Then we're going to have the this world is just going to be the world of the player, totally fine. And then we're going to open the inventory here. We're also going to add our 3 own slots. So these are our own slots, right? This is the index starts at 0 and just counts up, fairly straightforward. And the X and Y coordinates are the coordinates inside of the GUI, meaning that if I just go open this one up once more, this is 0, 0, and then I count down and to here. This is the only way that it's going to work. This is sadly how you're going to have to do it. I highly recommend just taking in, for example, Photoshop, or if you have something like Paint.net or GIMP, you can usually have a select tool in there. And if you select it, you should see the selection, the size of the selection. And then with that, you can basically take a look at where your slots start. Right, and that is pretty much it. The only custom thing here is also the isLightningStorm method. And this one is basically going to be used in the screen momentarily to display something different. So that's going to be very interesting. So let's go into the screen. This is going to be an extends the handled screen of type ScreenHandler. Now, we could probably also actually put in the lightning ScreenHandler. That actually makes more sense here. Then we're going to implement the draw background method. I'm going to hover over this again. I'm going to create constructor matching super here. And then what we want is we want a static identifier. This is going to be the texture. So this simply points to the actual texture, which we're going to copy over in just a moment. We're going to do the JSON files and the textures all in one fell swoop. And then what we want is we want the init method. So this is strictly not necessary. This just centers the title here. It really isn't necessary, but it does look kind of nice. We also want the render method. I'm also going to copy this one over. This basically just makes sure that everything is rendered properly. That's pretty much all of it. And then the draw background method, I'm also going to copy over the contents of this. The first three are just boilerplate stuff that just has to happen, basically. That's pretty much all that I know about this. I'm not too deep into the rendering system here, but this is just, this has to happen. Then this just makes sure that we're drawing everything in the correct space. And then the draw texture method, calling this, basically draws a particular texture. And this is going to be interesting because what happens here is that you can see that, first of all, we're going to give it the matrix stack. That's just something that we're going to have to give it. Okay, we're just going to take that. And then the first parameter is the x coordinate of where this starts to be drawn. Y coordinate of where this starts to be drawn. U is the offset inside of the GUI where we take this picture from. This is the Y offset. This is the width of the image we're going to draw, and this is the height of the image we're going to draw. If this is confusing, that's absolutely correct. This is not too straightforward. However, once again, this is something that, first of all, play around with it, and second of all, no worries at all, because actually I'm going to just copy over the texture here. So in our tutorial mod package, this is the GUIs or GUI? No, it is GUI. There you go. And I'm going to copy over the GUI texture right here to just show you and to basically explain what I mean. So if I open this, you can see this is the GUI. So first of all, you can see that we have like the overlays at the right here. And the actual, well, GUI is on the left. So if I want, this is basically what I want to happen. I can actually get rid of this. That's also very nice. So basically what I want to happen is that if there's a lightning storm, I want this yellow lightning to be displayed above this, you know, gray lightning. That's all that I want. So how can I do this? You can see we're going to basically start X and Y is basically the top right here, right? So this is what you can think about. And then 26X, so I go 26 pixels to the right and 31 pixels down. This is very important, right? So right here. And this is where I want to paste something in, basically. I want to put this right here. And that's what I happen here. That's what I specify here. 176, what is that? Well, we're just going to go 176 right here. And then we start right here and go 28 to the right and 36 down. Meaning we're now having this picture displayed right here. That's the general idea. If this is still confusing to you, it's fine. I highly recommend just taking the numbers and playing around with them a little bit. Just tweaking individual numbers, very important. Don't tweak too many numbers at once, otherwise you're not going to know what is what. I hope that this was sort of understandable. Also, if your image, in this case, this image is actually 256 by 256. If this is not the case, you can add 2 more parameters. So for example, if your texture is actually 100 times 100, you can just add this as well. It doesn't need to be 256 by 256. You can change it there. So that's very important. Otherwise, there's one more thing we need to do in the tutorial client mod class, and that is going to be the following. We have to do screen registry, actually. So screen registry register the mod screen handlers, mod screen handlers.lightning channeler screen handler with the lightning channeler screen : new. Now we just need to add the JSON files specifically for the lightning channeler so that it actually has a texture as well, because of course that's what we're going to need as well. So let's go in with the model. Those are just standard block model, block states JSON block, and the item model. It's all very standard, so no worries there. Of course, also all available to you in the description below for download. Same with the texture that we're going to copy over, so the block texture. And would you look at that, I actually put this in the wrong folder. So good thing that I've check this. So this, of course, needs to be under textures, GUI here. No worries there. And then this is going to be under lightning channel block. There you go. So one more thing we actually need to do is we need to create the screen handler right here. So let's make a new lightning channel screen handler with the sync ID, the player inventory actually. So this is INV, and then this basically passed in so that the actual block entity is passed into the screen handler. And then what we can also do is, because I usually do forget this, just get the JSON here, the translation. So this is the lightning handler, and then this is the right. Now everything has been added. Let's see if it works. Alright, we found ourselves in Minecraft, and as you can see, the lightning channel has been added. So let's place it down and let's right click, and there you go. We have everything inside of here just as we remember it, and everything is also lined up perfectly. So this is one of the most important things, right? In the screen handler, of course, the numbers for the, let's say, player inventory are fit for exactly this GUI size. So if you were to change the GUI size, you of course needed to change that as well. But let's take out a pepper and a iron wool here for the sake of argument. And if we set this in, nothing is going to happen because, of course, it's not lightning. So let's change the weather here to thunder. And what we will first of all see is that this is now going to turn into a actual lightning bolt. There you go. So that is pretty cool if I do say so myself. That is what I said before, where we actually counted this. And now if I do it like this, there you go. Now it's gonna craft this, and of course it's gonna basically go absolutely nuts, because every time we craft a ruby, in this case, the lightning is gonna strike. But it did work totally fine. That's pretty much how we can make a block entity. Right, like I said, this is a fairly complicated topic, so if something is still unclear, first of all, don't hesitate to ask a question in the comments below. I'm gonna be happy to answer them best of my ability. And also, all the code is available. I highly recommend just copying everything over part by part, going through it very slowly, methodically, trying to understand every part of it, and then basically, hopefully, you can sort of understand how it works and the intricacies there. And I also highly recommend taking a look at the next video in the Fabric series, because there we're going to make a custom recipe serialization, and we're going to make this a little bit more robust, also using the actual progress bar as well. So that's going to be very interesting. But this would be it for this tutorial right here. I hope you found this useful and you learned something new. If you did, I would very much appreciate a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials just like this one. So, yeah.